this video, we're going to be building off of the previous video where we took a look at how we built our materials. I've gone through and done a little bit of cleanup on that. And I've also discovered something about the engine that's kind of changed, and I'm not exactly sure the exact time whenever this change happened in the engine, but it has to do with the way with ambient occlusion works. So if we go to lit and we go this area and you can see our different lighting modes, if we go to this buffer visualization, you can see that there is a way for us to take a look at material ambient occlusion, and if we turn that on, you can see that there's actually nothing actually showing up in this. So we should be able to see the ambient occlusion map that was plugged into our material, and we should be able to see that in a black and white format within this buffer visualization. So what I found is that we have to go into the project settings, and if you go to the rendering section right here, you're going to have to go to the lighting area and say for allow static lighting, and you're going to turn that off, and it's asking you to restart the engine. So after a little bit of time, it's going to restart the engine, and it might have to recompile some of the shaders. So I'm going to pause it and let it start back up. All right, Unreal's back up and it's compiled all the shaders for us. And if we go up here and go to this area and we go take a look at this buffer and we take a look at the material ambient occlusion, now we can see properly what's going on here. This is the results that I was expecting, and this is kind of what I was hoping for in the material. So I had to do a little digging and investigation for this. They said they were trying to open up more space in the G buffer, I believe, to open up other shading models that they're trying to put in there. I don't know exactly what that means from a resource and memory standpoint, but you have to enable or disable that option that we just looked at in order for us to have this type of workflow that I'm kind of used to. I did show you in the shader how we could put this into color, but it does behave a bit different for how the specular gets handled within the corners of ambient occlusion. So if you want that model that I'm kind of used to, we'll have to go through that in the project settings. Now that we have that, I'm going to hit Control B. The other thing that I want to show you is that I'm going to go to the materials, and I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to show you some changes that I made to the parent material, and I kind of cleaned this up again. I made a material function, and we'll talk a little bit about the material function in just a second, but this is where the Fresel went. But this is what I ended up doing for the base color. So I just took the base color, ran it out inside of here. I just used the thing that we talked about for the base color tint dark, and then we made this a multiply, and then we did a base color tint light and added that. And then I fed this in as a lerp, and then this has got the base color lerp alpha. And what we've got going on here is if we want to do a difference and fade in between what the texture looked like before we fed any of this information to it, we can fade in and out of that. Okay, so then this gets piped into this other thing where if we want to add AO into the color map, this is this method that we were using before. Let me go back here. I'm just going to grab the mesh and then plug it into this area so we can kind of look at it this way. And I'll go ahead and save that. I don't think that option was saved with it. So if we wanted to see the color map, the result of everything that we pushed through here, blended in with the AO, I'm just taking the multiply. So I'm taking the actual texture itself and then multiplying it by this, and then I'm doing a lerp between what is this and the result of this one here. So we got an A and a B, and then I'm dialing in this AO into color reveal. And so this is our red, green, blue map that had occlusion. This was piping out to, let's see, where's this guy going? Metallic, and then roughness. If we go here, take a look at this. This is the red channel, so that's going into ambient occlusion. This one is going into roughness, and then this one's going into metallic. So with this setup, I was able to basically with the AO, I did an add node instead. So if we add 0 to that, this black and white map, That's giving our same main inclusion that we just looked at in this this buffer visualization, right? So if we went here, this is what's being driven with this this red channel here. And so if we do an add node to this and we just add 0 to it, it's not going to do any kind of change to it. But then if we go in their material instance and we start cranking that up to 1, it'll start making this a white map. So it's basically killing the AO if we want to kill it. And so that's overriding that. Now, the other maps are going to be darker. And then if we multiply by a value of 1, it doesn't do anything. And if we push it to 0 or past 1, we can get some different effects for that. So that'll allow us to kind of tweak that. So I just kind of cleaned that up, and everything was working as I would expect at that point. Then at this stage, I wanted to show you a little bit of an additional thing that I think is pretty cool. It's a material function. So if you have a material function, what you can do, let me go ahead and load this up. I took everything that we had in the Fresel node and I pushed it out into this thing that says output result. And then it allows you to set up this this material function that you might use over and over again. So you can just push this into some of your different materials that you start to make. So I just called this Fresel material function, and it's pretty easy to make a material function. I just made a group, a new folder for that, and then right click on here, and then you can say under materials and textures, you can say find a material function, and you just create a material function that way. You can give it whatever name you want. If you load this up, you can see it's just basically had this output result, and it still has all the things that we had from being able to set up anything in the material graph. I'm going to go ahead and close that. Let's go ahead and delete that. Don't really need that. But if I go in here, we can see this is what I had for the Fresel node. And if you remember on here, if we just type in Fresel like this, we're going to get this node that gives us here. If we hold down S and click, this will give us a single value scalar that we can name and then parameterize it already. So I just called this Fresel exponent, and I call this BRF for the base reflection fraction in. So that's how those are plugged in. And if you just right click in here and you type in normal, and then I usually had to scroll down to the bottom here under the vectors area and then just find a pixels normal world space. You can plug that in normal. And if you remember, what we did with that is we did a multiply node, hold on M and then click, and then we can drag this in here. And then I was able to give a color, just hold down 3 and tap, and then you can right click and say convert to parameter, and you can give that a name. So I call that a Fresel color. So that's all pretty easy to set up. Selected everything, you can tap C to add a comment to it and just call that, and then run it into here. And then once you save it, then that becomes something that you can always just drag into your materials that you're going to be building with. So I've got this material function area. I could just click and drag it in here, and then I'll have that. So some other ways to get those in here. So if we right click and we type in material function call, we can grab this and they'll say an unspecified function. And then if you take one of your material functions, you can actually just plug it in this way. That's another way that you can do it. Now, if you don't have one created, let's just try to see if we can make a material function call like this. So we could do this. This was already selected over here, so it just fill that in for us. That's another way that we can kind of grab this and then pull this in. The other thing that we can do is if we want to make a brand new one, we can right click and say material function call, and then get that. And then you can see that there's nothing specified in here. And if we want to go and make a brand new one, you can say create new asset. And then it's going to tell you where do you want to put this at. And I was just making a folder group called material functions. And if you want to give it a name and then call it something like this, you could save that. and then that makes a whole brand new material function for you. So again, it's if you're going to set some of these things up and you're going to reuse parts like this, you might find that it might be a little bit easier for you to set up the material functions. And then the other thing is it could make your material look a lot cleaner too. So you can see I don't have to have that entire section. It's just coming from that material function, and then it gets pushed out to the emissive color area. And I'll go ahead and hit save for this. And then we still have all the same controls that we had before. So if we go to a material instance, it's going to still recognize that we have the Fresnel color node, and it's still going to have the different parts to it that we can kind of play around with, where we still have access to all the information that we would have. But like I said, it can make it a little bit cleaner for you. It could make it also in a team setting, or if you're starting to build up your own library of stuff that you start to make in your materials, you can make these material functions and then just drag them out and maybe make your life a little bit easier, right? And so here's where I'm just changing the ambient occlusion on there, and just want to make sure that that works. So I just wanted to show you how I kind of took the material. I think in the last section I just kind of rushed through that a little bit, then found some of that oddity with what was going on with AO and getting some different results than what I was expecting. So I wanted to show you everything that I found on that, and if you run into those same kind of issues, you'll be prepared and be able to work with that. But now with this material that I've shown you and everything that's been set up on it, there's quite a few options for you to play around with the values and get different colors and kind of tweak metallic values and roughness values and color values, and be able to tweak AO as well. So you should have a lot at your disposal. And then now we've got everything we need to make really good looking materials. Let's look at what we need to do to make a good looking environment to showcase our work.